The world watched in shock as plumes of smoke rose above Yemen on March 16, 2025. The United States had launched a series of airstrikes against Houthi rebel targets across the war-torn nation. These strikes, described by U.S. officials as decisive and powerful, resulted in a horrific toll on human life. Initial reports confirmed at least 31 fatalities, with the number feared to rise significantly. Over 100 individuals were injured, many critically, painting a grim picture of the devastation. The strikes targeted several locations across Yemen, including the capital city of Sana'a. Explosions rocked the city, leaving behind shattered windows and widespread panic. Sada, a Houthi stronghold, also witnessed the fury of the American offensive. Other provinces, including Al-Baida, Haja, and Damar, were not spared from the assault. The strikes targeted what the U.S. government labeled as Houthi leadership and infrastructure, but the human cost was undeniable. Among the casualties were innocent civilians, including women and children. The Al-Jarraf district in Sana'a was particularly devastated, with reports indicating 13 killed and 9 wounded, many of whom were families caught in the crossfire. In Sada province, the situation was equally dire. At least 10 individuals, including 4 children, lost their lives. These casualties underscore the brutal reality of the conflict and the devastating impact on innocent lives. The attacks plunged Yemen further into chaos and despair. The already fragile infrastructure, crippled by years of conflict, suffered further damage. The airstrikes served as a stark reminder of the ongoing humanitarian crisis in Yemen, where millions face hunger, disease, and displacement. The international community watched with bated breath, questioning the long-term consequences of this escalation. The U.S. government wasted no time in justifying its actions. The airstrikes, they argued, were a direct response to a series of provocations by the Houthi rebels. For months, the Houthis had been targeting commercial shipping in the Red Sea, a vital waterway for global trade. These attacks, often involving explosive-laden boats and drones, threatened international shipping, and by extension, U.S. interests in the region. The Biden administration pointed to the Houthis' refusal to cease their attacks on maritime traffic despite repeated warnings. They argued that the strikes were necessary to deter future aggression and protect freedom of navigation in the Red Sea. The targeting of Houthi leadership and infrastructure, they claimed, was aimed at crippling their ability to carry out further attacks. However, critics were quick to point out the potential for these strikes to backfire. The civilian casualties, they argued, would only serve to further inflame tensions and bolster support for the Houthis. Some experts suggested that the strikes were more about projecting American strength in the region than addressing the root causes of the conflict. The U.S. justification for the strikes did little to quell the outrage among many in the international community. Concerns remained about the legality of the strikes and the potential for further escalation. The situation in Yemen, already a complex web of competing interests and actors, seemed more precarious than ever. The international community reacted to the U.S. airstrikes with a mixture of condemnation and apprehension. The United Nations Security Council convened an emergency meeting to discuss the situation, with many member states expressing deep concern over the escalation of violence. The strikes drew sharp criticism from various quarters, with many world leaders calling for restraint and a return to diplomacy. Iran, a longtime supporter of the Houthi rebels, vehemently condemned the U.S. actions. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi denounced the strikes as a violation of international law and a dangerous escalation of the conflict. Russia, another key player in the region, called for an immediate cessation of hostilities and a return to the negotiating table. Even within the United States, the strikes were met with a mixed response. While some lauded the Biden administration for taking a tough stance against the Houthis, others questioned the wisdom of military intervention in a conflict with no easy solutions. Human rights groups condemned the civilian casualties and urged all parties to prioritize the protection of innocent lives. The international community found itself grappling with the fallout of the U.S. airstrikes, caught between condemning the violence and seeking a peaceful resolution to the conflict. The strikes served as a stark reminder of the fragility of peace and the devastating human cost of war. The recent U.S. airstrikes are but the latest chapter in Yemen's long and turbulent history. The country has been ravaged by civil war since 2014, when the Houthi rebels, a Shia Muslim group, seized control of the capital Sana'a, forcing the internationally recognized government to flee. The conflict escalated dramatically in 2015, when a Saudi-led coalition, backed by the United States, intervened militarily in support of the Yemeni government. The war in Yemen has become a complex web of proxy conflicts, with regional and international powers vying for influence. Iran's backing of the Houthis and Saudi Arabia's support for the Yemeni government have turned the conflict into a proxy war between the two regional rivals. The United States, initially a staunch supporter of the Saudi-led intervention, has gradually reduced its involvement in recent years, but remains a key player in the conflict. The humanitarian crisis in Yemen is widely regarded as the world's worst, with millions facing starvation, disease, and displacement. The conflict has destroyed the country's infrastructure, crippled its economy, and left its people in dire need of humanitarian assistance. Despite numerous attempts at brokering a ceasefire and initiating peace talks, a lasting solution to the conflict remains elusive. The recent U.S. airstrikes, while presented as a response to Houthi aggression, risk further entangling the United States in this complex and intractable conflict. The strikes highlight the challenges of navigating the treacherous waters of the Yemeni crisis, and the urgent need for a peaceful resolution that addresses the root causes of the conflict and alleviates the suffering of the Yemeni people.